This is a bit of a conversation about the world of psychology. And it is not a world, I think you'll see at the end that it's a world that is increasingly becoming part of your world. But to the extent that you encounter Western thought, whether it's through culture, whether it's through politics, whether it's through entertainment, whether it's through a lot of the spirituality, you encounter psychological thought. The Western world is a psychologized world. It is a world that no longer views itself as a world shaped by God and shaped by truth. It's a world shaped by inner feelings. And so those are the people we were going to relate to. You may not be ministering to or pastoring anybody who uses these words. But if they're exposed to the Western world, they'll be using these ideas and probably in some sense living out of them. So one of the things we need to do as pastors, I need to do as a pastor, is to be discerning the influences that are shaping our people. There are significant influences that you are very aware of, the influences that have come from the Orthodox Church in people's lives, the various kinds of church experiences, the culture that you live in. I'm not concerned that you won't be picking that up, but there are things that come from particularly from the West that are shaping the way the world looks at things, and particularly as it relates to believers creating false gospels. So these are, in a sense, false gospels that if you are doing counseling or someone is coming to you because they want counseling, they may be coming with these false gospels and not even know it. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Increasingly, practically speaking, we are all counseling people who live in a world that denies God and His Word. You probably know that, but that is happening. And that's the way it is. Paul in Romans 1:18-25, I know this is a significant passage for you as you're studying. This is a crucial passage for understanding worldview. I'll read it and then just let you know how we come out of this. So Paul writes, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For His invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks to Him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore God gave them up to the lust of their hearts, to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forevermore." Amen. Just a few quick thoughts on that. What we learned from Paul is that one pan-cultural reality is that God reveals Himself. The God of the Bible reveals Himself across culture, across time. There is no culture who has not been exposed to the God of the Bible, now or in the past. And so the lack of submission to and worship of God is not simply because people have not had the gospel brought. It's because they've denied what God has given them to see. We all do that. There is no excuse. What happens is we are not left looking for the true God because, and frankly, we don't want to know the true God. Sin makes us not want to know what we are plainly seeing. We want to, even if we are to see it, and you know that in cultures where the gospel has been brought, just because it comes, it does not mean people, so there's the answer. Finally, I can know God. They will reject the gospel. The very truth of God gets rejected because people don't want to know God. The fall is the experience of our ancestors saying, I can live how I want to live without reference to God. I don't need God to make me whole. I can live in this world without God. And that is the original sin that we all live out of. So, it's not that we don't worship. You know all this. We are worshipers. We look for things to worship. And so we turn to ourselves. Paul describes sort of early primitive understandings of worship of idols and those kind of things. But as we get sophisticated, we don't move beyond idol worship. We just make the idols more ideas and values, and ultimately ourself. The worship of self is the main idolatry. And we exchange the glory of God for images resembling mortal man ourselves. And we see the consequences of the fall because we've exchanged truth about God for a lie. And we worship and serve the creature ourselves rather than the Creator who's blessed forevermore. This is our problem. This is what we, to the extent that we're dealing with people in their sin, we're dealing with people who are not able or not worshiping God the way they want, the way He calls them to. And because of that, they don't live a life of order. They are disordered people. So when we encounter disordered people, what we encounter is disordered worship, primarily. Augustine said, and you've sure have covered this, Thou hast made us for Thyself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in Thee. We have the privilege as preachers and as counselors to present the place of rest to people, to invite them into the place of shalom, of peace. I wrote a book about peace because I feel it's the crucial need of the people that in my world, they live frantic and busy and perplexed and struggling and stressed and even believers living according to a world system that robs you of peace and gives you no rest. And so that may be including relational rest. We live with discord among others. And so the whole point of me writing that book was to say God wants us to experience peace. Not just everything going well, but shalom, flourishing. The idea, one author who wrote on the issue of shalom said, peace is the way things ought to be. God designed a world of peace for us to live in and experience peace with Him, peace with others, and peace ourselves. Sin has disordered that world, and people live with no peace. But He has invited us back, reconciled us to Himself, that we might have peace with Him and therefore live at peace in our hearts and in ourselves, even in a disordered world. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to help our people live at peace in a disordered world. The problem is they are being given other gospels. They are being told there are other ways to live at peace. There are other means to get to peace. And that's what the world of psychology does. It offers false ways to peace. I live in a psychologized world. I live in a world, particularly in the West, where people view themselves primarily from an individual, internal frame of reference. They don't think of themselves in community. They don't think of themselves in a heritage. They think of themselves as individuals in the world. The values that we particularly value are things like personal happiness and satisfaction with our lives. Most people in my country have their primary needs met, and they don't have to consider that. We were talking, I was talking with Jordan last night, and they were talking about how they realized they were running out of diapers. And so he went to 7 different stores to find the right kind of diapers. He thought, we can't run out of diapers for a 1-year-old. It's not good. And so how he had to go find diapers because there was a shortage of diapers. We have shortages, but people shop in our world to find better prices. Oh, I've got it there, but I'll get it over here. I'll do this, and so all of in my world, our primary needs are met. That does not mean that we're satisfied. When your primary needs are met, what you will do is take your secondary needs and make them primary. That's the human heart. So you may have health and home and prosperity in abundance. You will not be satisfied. Now you must say, but I also must have happiness, and I must have others affirm who I am. So we live in our culture where I can have all these primary needs met, but my secondary needs, the fact that I want to live my sexuality the way I want to live it, I want to live in the gender of my choice. I want to live, and you not only need to recognize that, but you need to affirm that. You cannot tell me I can't live how I want. That's the culture that tells us that even if we have our primary needs met, we have no peace. My culture wants total freedom to express ourselves and total support in how we do it. We want spirituality without accountability to God. We want to be able to create our own spirituality however we feel it best fits our needs. We don't care about eternal realities. We want everything in this life. I want it now. A very popular saying in my culture is, I want it all and I want it now. We do all we can to avoid thinking about things like death and pain and suffering, and we avoid any suffering that we can. Now, that's a human tendency, but we have developed it into an art form. And I use my culture because I want to say these ideas come from my culture. This is the culture that creates these ideas that we're going to be talking about. To the extent that they affect the people you care for or the people you evangelize, if you are in a university environment, this is going to be an issue for you. If you're in a major city, particularly an international city like this is, it's going to be an issue. And so you're going to want to know how to deal with it. This is the world that in some way you will pastor moving forward in life. So there are 4 essential questions. When you're talking about understanding the area of study we're talking about is human personality and behavior. That's what it's officially called. Human personality and behavior. Who people are and how they function. And so there are 4 essential questions of human personality and behavior. Question number 1, this is in your outline. Who are we? Who are we as human beings? That's a question of existence. It's called an existential question. The second question is, what is wrong with us? There's nobody in the world who thinks they have it all and everything is great. Everybody is aware of some kind of an issue of problems that they live in. What is wrong with us? Nobody is happy with who they are. The third question is, what should be right with us? If there's something wrong, what would right look like? And the fourth question is, what would it take to fix the problem? The problem of being wrong and I want to be right. What does it take to fix the problem? Now, before we jump into these ideas, let me ask you to address that from a biblical perspective. So, you tell me, from a biblical perspective, who are we? From your study. Yeah. So, but tell me. Don't just give me a text. Tell me. Describe it.
Image bearers.
Yes. Okay. What does that mean, though? That's a great term, but what does it mean that we're image bearers? The third word you said was the crucial word. Made. We are made. Right? That means we are not self-existent. That means there was intentionality to us being on this earth. So that's a crucial part of who we are. We're more than that, but we are made. We are created beings. We are creatures. There is a creator. That implies there is a creator who has made us. What else about us? Yes, well, Revised Regents, we have a responsibility to God. God has called us to live a certain way, correctly? He hasn't put us on in this earth to do what we want. We have a calling. Excellent. Yes, yeah. So yeah, we have gender. We are distinct by gender. What's also connected to that? Being distinct by gender.
The roles.
Well, there's roles, but we're distinct, but we are co-equal. Right? Men and women are equal before the Lord. Gender differences and roles have nothing to do with our equality before God. So the implication of that is God views all mankind the same way. He didn't create different races or ethnicities as superior to others. The fact that there is race and ethnicity is a beautiful thing. Diversity is a beautiful thing. But equality is what makes it beautiful. What else? Yes. We're not just physicality, right? We're not just atoms and molecules and DNA and genetic material. We're not just chemicals in a bodysuit, right? There is personhood within our bodies. What about that personhood? Will that personhood just end when we stop breathing? Will that personhood transform into a higher form of being when we stop living on this earth? Yeah. Glorified, but that's different than higher form. Yeah, the reason I'm saying that is because Hinduism says when you die, you move to a higher form and you continue to progress, right? Millions, billions of people understand themselves that way. This is how I understand who I am, correct? So that's what we are. We are persons. There's another aspect to us as well. And we've already sort of referenced it. We are dependent. We are not self-defining. We cannot exist on our own. If God is the one who sustains every breath, we are dependent. So that's who we are. We are created in the image of God, created in the image of God according to His likeness, male and female. There is wonderful diversity in humanity. There is equality in humanity. We have been given responsibility in humanity to live a certain way. We are accountable to God for how we live. We are body and soul. We live in an existence where life will go on. We have to mix in a little bit of Genesis 2 and 3 in that, but the reality is we are before God in our souls as well, and we are dependent on Him. That's who we are. That's what the Bible says of who we are. What we're going to see as we talk about this is that is not what psychology says we are, no matter what psychology you're looking at. Next question: what is wrong with us? Biblically, this is us doing biblical psychology. What's wrong with us? We are sinners. What does that mean? Did we just make a mistake? Like you say, we're fallen. I can fall off here, and that doesn't mean I've changed in any meaningful way. What does it mean by fallen? Rebellious. We know the truth, we know God, and we know what He requires of us. Adam and Eve knew what God required of them, and they disobeyed. At the heart of sin is disobedience to God. And so, and that's what Paul's talking about in Romans. We are disobedient. Our problem begins with disobedience. And what is the effect of disobedience? We need God. We are dependent on God. We disobey. We turn away from God. We reject God. What Paul's talking about here is the foolishness of beings who are totally dependent on God, saying, "I don't need you." This turning away from God is foolishness. It's the height of insanity. So we need to know that, because we need to recognize that this idea of fallenness is not just an experience, it's a way we view the world. By rejecting God, we reject everything that He says about us and the world, right? And so we live in folly, in foolishness. What does it say about the fool? There is no fear of the Lord in the fool. We stop fearing God, and if we do that, now we start worshiping ourselves. So there is a false worship. We talked about, we don't stop worshiping. We just take the worship that's due to the Lord. That is our highest joy, and we turn and try to worship something else. So before we get to the idea of what the sentence of death is and the suffering that comes from that, we have to recognize that we have taken the most important thing about us and we have perverted it and turned it into something that serves us rather than the Creator. So those are the things that are wrong us. There are implications of that. Our hearts are corrupted, right? We can't just turn back and say, you know what, oh, that's a bad idea. You know what, sorry, God, that was a bad decision. No. Because by rejecting God, we move into foolishness. Our hearts are darkened. They're made cloudy, so we can't make judgment right. We can't understand ourselves or our world correctly. So the disorder, and so we become the authors of the disorder in the world. We create systems of disorder to serve our false worship. Our economics serves our false worship. Our politics serves our false worship. Our religion serves our false worship. All that's taking place, that's the world we live in. And what else happens between us and God? Enmity, right? He is now our enemy, and we are His. He loves us, but we stand in opposition to Him. What does it do in our relationships with each other? Yeah, broken relationships. Even the closest relationships, husband and wife, broken. Things that should work a certain way because of creation are now broken and can't work that way. And so this is important because our problems, that's the biblical psychology of our problems. And we can keep going on. Let's talk about guilt. We are guilty, but we carry within us the pervasive sense of our guilt. And so a lot of our life management is to find a way to deal with guilt and shame without being forgiven. That's what, and you see that in people, and we talked yesterday about escapes. What people are escaping from a lot of times is this enduring sense of guilt and an inability to live how I know I should live. We still have an ethical, all societies have some ethics, but we never live up to our own ethics. Paul said, the things I want to do, I don't do. The things I don't do, I keep on doing. I know what is right, but I don't do it. I know what is best, but I don't do it. I sabotage myself and everything around me as I worship myself. So that's what's wrong with us. So what should be right with us? Peace with God, peace with others, peace in our souls, an inner sense that things are right. Right relationship with God, right relationship with others, right relationship with ourselves, not a disordered soul, an ordered soul, and a sense of flourishing, a sense that as I move into the world, I actually produce things that benefit the world. But this is a fascinating one right here, because if you're familiar with the world of the arts, particularly as they're practiced in the West, the inspiration for most art in the West is our corruption, not the beauty of God. People are trying to find ways to express the brokenness of life, not the beauty of life through art. So that's kind of what should be right with us, and what's the answer to that? What gets us from where we are to where we want to be? The gospel. And really, what is the gospel ultimately? Yeah, Jesus Christ. It's a person. When we talk about the gospel is always the testimony of the person. It's not the doctrine. The doctrine expounds the testimony of the person, but when we are evangelizing people, we are not introducing them to a new doctrinal way of life, are we? No, we're saying something. This is what I try to remind myself and other people in evangelism, particularly in a secular world. I know a guy. He came over 2,000 years ago to live. And he lived in a certain place in the Middle East. And he came and he said he was God's answer for all of our problems. And he said, believe that I'm an answer for all our problems. And people so didn't want to hear that message that they killed him. Here's the crazy thing. So far, you can agree with me. You can agree that a man could have come, and men come all the time, and women come all the time, and tell people that they're the answer, and tell people that they have the way of salvation. And because they are not liked for doing that, they are killed. Every culture has those people. I can take the most secular person on a university and they will agree with me up to that point. But then I say, but he didn't stay dead. He raised himself up. And guess what? He's alive right now. And as you and I are talking, He is right here in this conversation. Not metaphysically, not philosophically, not ethically. There is a person right now who is informing this conversation, who is personally inviting you to believe in him, and you can't even see him. That's evangelism. And you tell people, you know how crazy that sounds? My whole life is built as if that's true. I am totally sold out to that crazy idea. You might think it's bizarre. You might think, well, that's just your... No, this is not my religion. There's a guy I know. I talk to him every day. I hear from him. He talks back. He tells me what to do. That's what we're talking about. That's what the world doesn't want. They don't want that. They don't want that. They don't want that God being that close. And if there is a God that close, they don't want him to be that powerful. All these systems we're going to talk about avoid that issue. All these systems do all they can to declare that that person whose name is Jesus Christ, whose name is Jesus, whose office is Christ, is alive right now and is active and is powerfully moving to save you from your sin. All that they deny. That's why we cannot really integrate psychology with Christianity. Because the basic worldview of Christianity that we've described is not possible in any of the 600 theories of psychology. There is none of the 600 plus, and they're growing all the time, theories of psychology that allows a personal Jesus to save people today. So that's what you're dealing with. And so people, you're going to find, I think you found this, I'm not anti-psychology in terms of the insights you can get from human behavior, but I am anti-thinking that you can combine psychology with Christianity as the Bible describes it because of these worldview issues. So let's look at three different ways psychology is developed. There are basically three schools. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. I've got more material than I'll cover, but I'm going to talk about these four areas and how they address these four areas. Who are we? What is wrong with us? What should be right with us? And what would it take to fix the problem? The first one we'll talk about is what can be called the medical model. Very prominent now. The medical model is simply this. The medical model says basically our problems are just part of who we are. And they need to be addressed through some sort of chemical intervention. The way the medical model developed is actually over time. The initial psychologists were all doctors. They were all medical doctors, but they were dealing with people who had behavioral and emotional and mental problems. They didn't know what to do, so they thought maybe we can find a way to cure them. So how do we diagnose them? So early diagnosis, medical diagnosis, was called phrenology. You ever heard the word phrenology? Phrenology believed that you could figure out a person's personality problems by feeling their head. It was all based on, they mapped people's heads. This is European science. They would say, okay, where are your bumps on your head, and where are there not bumps on your head? And we can map that, and we can tell you what your personality problems are by the way we touch your head. That was the treatment for people in the 1800s. That's how you did psychology. But they started to develop that isn't necessarily scientific, so they moved beyond that. But what we've seen over the years is, particularly in the West, this view of materialism. And so the question of who are we, from a medical model perspective, is we are nothing but our biology. There is no soul. There is no eternity. You are biology, and then you cease to exist, and then you, in whatever form, no longer exist in the universe, in any place. So there is no eternity, and there is no life after death. Everything is here, and everything is your biology. So any problem you have is a biological problem. That's how they view things. And so we have to understand that the medical model is saying that the problem is that we are basically bags of chemicals, and we've evolved that way. We've evolved from one organism into complex organism, and now we're treating the complex organism, and we're helping the complex. So even your cognition, your thinking of yourself as a person is not really your personhood. It's your brain functioning to make your body move forward in certain actions. So you have no personality. You only have a fictitious, developed concept of who you are based on the way the chemicals in your brain are functioning. That's who we are. What's wrong with us is that the problem is we are deteriorating from the moment of birth. We are deteriorating. And we have a peak. Most people, absent of any major medical problem, have a peak of life around the age of 25. So if you're 25, this is the best it's ever going to get. It's downhill from here. And then you start to look like me. And but you start deteriorating. And so the goal of what's our problem is we are deteriorating physical beings. And everything deteriorates. Our minds, our bodies, our capabilities are finite and limited by what's going on physically with us. So that's our problem. And so how do they address morality? Morality is simply the way these physical beings organize so they don't do too much damage to one another. Because it's in the best interest of the organisms to work together so that they are not all destroyed. That's the way the medical model thinks about our problems. You need to be treated for your mental health condition because you can be damaging to yourself or to others. And that's not good for the community, the group of physical beings. What should be right with us is that, you get this awful problem in the medical model. We are deteriorating. We cannot stop it. Medicine wants to find a way to stop it. Like you probably have seen shows like this, or you've seen ideas like this in movies and things, but the goal for many people is let's take our brains outside of our bodies, find ways to preserve our brains. And if we can preserve our brains, then we continue to exist even if our bodies go. And so basically the world will be a place where brains are kept so that people can live forever. That's the goal. That's the goal of the medical model. We have to find a way because we cannot stop aging. In my culture, aging is a terrible thing. Aging is a curse. And so we live in my culture with this fear of death, because death is finite. It's the end of everything. There's no room for spirituality in this. Death is the end of everything. So I do not want to die, but I also have to undo these physical deteriorations, and so I must find ways to try to stay as young as possible. And so what you have in my culture now is the average lifespan is increasing for people. So now the average lifespan for a person in my culture is about 92 years old. It's easy to live to 92 years old in my culture. But the quality of life cannot be changed because I continue to deteriorate. So what are they doing? They're extending the lifespan with the inability to extend the quality of life during that span. And so you have things like dementia become a much bigger issue, and memory loss issues, and long-term physical disability because your life is being prolonged by medicine, but medicine cannot make your life better. That's the medical model in the way it functions. And that's what's happening in this, and that's what people want. I don't want to die, but I want to be as young as possible for as long as possible. That's my culture. That's why this is important in my culture. And so what it takes to fix the problem is basically science. Science is the answer for everything. We know historically that whenever science has made the answer for everything, science creates as many problems as it cures. And because science believes everything is based on empirical evidence, but it's not. And science solves some problems without recognizing the problems that it created. The nuclear age is a science issue that now, even right now, there is a concern that nuclear weapons could be used in the war in Ukraine, and it could escalate. That's science at work. So science now is being debated as, is it a help or is it not? But it's still the way people do things. So that's the medical model. The thing I want you to get from that is people will feel like, just give me a drug to fix my problem. Give me a drug to fix my problem. The second one we're looking at is what is called the psychodynamic. And it's a complicated word, but it basically means our psychology is a dynamic thing. And that's where you get the name Sigmund Freud. If you're familiar with Freud, he is the father of psychology, but he's known for this psychodynamic. I will share with you how it fits this. It is a very complex, and ultimately, when you read Freudian psychology, it is almost, in fact, frankly, nobody really believes it anymore, but it's the basis for a lot of other things, and so that's why it still exists. But the idea of Freudian psychology is who are we? We are people with internal motivations that we cannot understand. And those motivations are what drive us. There's certain things, well, doesn't the Bible say that? We're saying, no, but the way Freud says it is that it's all in the mind. There is an outer mind, a personality, but there's an inner drive. And what Freud says is that that's what we are. But he says that every person is driven by two primary cravings: sex and the fear of death. That if you're going to understand yourself, you have to think about sex and you have to think about death. Everything you do is about sex and death. He's very clear on that. That's the basis of his understanding. Why? Because he started trying to figure out what makes people crazy, and he started experimenting on himself. Freud's biggest project was experimenting on himself. So he said, well, my biggest concern is I've got fears about sex and I have fears about death. That must be the way everybody is. That's how Freud got his ideas. If I'm this way, everybody must be this way. So sex and death. And if you do anything like Freudian, it's going to be sex and death. And the way he says is that people create elaborate ways of living life to avoid the fear of sex and death. Religion is an avoidance of sex and death. That's how he understands religion. In fact, he says, I have the quotes here, but religion is a system of willful illusions together with a disavowal of reality, such as that we find nowhere else but in a state of blissful hallucinatory confusion. So we are all here in blissful hallucinatory confusion. We are all here massively self-deceived because we are afraid of sex and death and we don't want to face it. That's what we have. And so what he says our problem is when we don't get in there and dig out those cravings and those motivations, we act out of them without knowing about it. So our behavior problems and our thinking problems are because we're not facing it. That's our problem. We're not facing sex and death, and that's what we're doing. So what's needed for it? We need to dig inside ourselves. Everything that our problems and all of our solutions have to come from within and be pulled out by an expert. A lot of our counseling, and this is where, remember we talked earlier this week, guys, about people wanting expertise from you. Sometimes people want expertise because you're a clergy, because you're a man of God, and they think men of God bring expertise. As you encounter people who are not shaped by religion, they're going to be coming to you for your expertise because they believe Freud. They believe that you need to be a therapist, someone whose skill is in getting the ugly inside stuff to the outside. And it doesn't heal you. In a Freudian system, in a psychodynamic system, your life is getting inside stuff out. You never reach a point of health in this model. You only reach a point of insight. The goal of this is insight. So that's why a lot of people most people who do this kind of therapy now are people who have a lot of money, because you do it, you pay a lot of money and you do it your whole life. Weekly sessions at $800 American for 50, 60 years. That would be typical. That would be understood. 30 years, 40 years, weekly, out of pocket. That's what this does. Now, obviously, most people can't do that, but this idea, counselors view themselves as somebody who has training, and this is where the point is for us. Training and skill are the key to counseling. That's why we've been talking against that this week. Yes, you want to be skilled, but if you say, I need more skills or more training, you're falling into a Freudian dynamic that my skills are what make a difference. And you take the emphasis off the gospel. So be careful with that, because people, particularly younger, your generation people, are going to be coming to you influenced by this. If they're on the campus here in Addis, they're going to be influenced by this. This is what's shaping their thinking. They're coming and thinking their problems are somewhere deep, and if they just had insight, and you'll find people who just want more and more insight. I want to understand myself better. I need to understand myself better. I need, if I'm going to feel better about myself, I need to understand. That's all Freud. So that's Freudianism. The goal is never wholeness. The goal is insight in Freudianism. Yeah. Yeah, I think Freud as an atheist is trying to deal with, it's interesting, Freud as an atheist is trying to deal with the corruption that's within. He sees that. He recognizes this isn't simply behavior, it's motivation. So that's what was radical about him, was he said, no, there's motivation that's taking place from somewhere. And I use this down here because this is the way it feels for people if they have it. It's not, oh, I have insight. It's blah! Out of this comes insight. The messiness that comes inside. So there, I think you're right. There is an awareness for an atheist that it's ugly. I had that sort of Freudian experience for about a year after my friends went to prison, before I came to Christ, when I realized there is something inside of me that I cannot account for, that is driving me, and I don't have any control over it. Freud was very attractive to me. I actually wrote papers about Freud at that time because it made a lot of sense to me. I didn't believe in God, but I believed there was something really evil in me, and that's what Freud's getting at. There's stuff in there that's really bad, and you need an expert to get it out. What we need is redemption. We need the Savior, but Freud does that. So Freud that's why he is often called a priest. He's a secular priest. That's how he viewed himself. And his followers viewed themselves as secular priests. Priests without God. So, yeah. Well, yeah, but interesting, what Calvin said was the only way for us to have an accurate knowledge of ourselves is to first have an accurate knowledge of God. Any attempt to have an accurate knowledge of myself without an accurate knowledge of God will lead to a perverted knowledge of myself. So that's Calvin's argument with Freud. With Freud, you can look at yourself, but you're going to have a perverted understanding because you don't have the main factor. So yeah, self-knowledge is a good thing, but without an accurate view of who we are before God, we will never get good insight. That year of mine was massively depressive. I was angry, and it produced in me all kind of bad things. There was a time there was one point where I considered suicide. Not very long, and I would never say I was suicidal. But I thought, if this is who I am, why should I live? There is no hope for me. And I went into a drug binge looking to say, what is the best way to escape in this time? I didn't care. Because why live? If this is who I am, why live? And so it produces, and that's what it produces. That's why you have people who go to great lengths to escape and medicate their problems because of this issue. They have a deep sense of the evil and guilt in their souls, but they have no God and no hope in this life. So yeah, you're right, but self-knowledge without God will actually crush you. It will crush your soul. And so what with Freud, that's the main thing I want to get. You don't have to know Freud. You just have to smell him in people. You have to hear him in people's language. You have to understand when people are coming to you with expectations where they're not getting those expectations consciously. It's coming to them through what they're reading, and that's why I say campuses, because if somebody is on a college campus and they're in any studies program, this is in there. This is in there. So then the third, which is actually more prominent right now in various ways, is what we call the human potential model. The human potential model, so if you think about it this, in the medical model, we are our problems. Our problems are our physicality. Our brain not functioning right, our body's not functioning right. So we are it. Problems are us. In the Freudian model, all the problems are in here, inside of us. In the human potential movement, all the problems are outside of us. We are basically good. And if everything outside of us worked better, we would be good. And many people live this way now. Most religions, legalism is built around in some form of this idea. They attach it to belief in God, but the idea is my goodness is what gives me meaning. So there's a lot of different ways. My behavioral goodness, my sense of self. We talk about, if you ever hear the word self-esteem, that is right from here. That there was back in about 20 years ago, there was a significant idea that self-esteem is the key to living life. That if someone has high self-esteem, they can live a good life. If they don't have a good life, if they have struggles, it's because they have low self-esteem. Have you guys heard that? If you have problems, you have low self-esteem? Thank you. Great. Many, many people who counsel right now still counsel that way. The interesting thing is there's no evidence that's true. About 10 years ago, a lot of things in psychology happen in fads, it's very popular for a while and then it moves on. The self-esteem movement was a fad. It happened for a while, but people still believe it. But one of the founders of the self-esteem movement started to question it. And so he went back and he did a study of, I think there were 15,000 different psychological studies on self-esteem, something like that. And he went through all those, and he realized that only 150 of them are really reliable. In other words, they were actually done reliably, done according to the way studies should be done. And of those 150, there was no evidence that self-esteem matters in people's lives. You can have low self-esteem or high self-esteem. Your problem's going to be the same. They may look differently, but raising someone's self-esteem did not have any value. What you're doing is what we always need to do, is we need to reinterpret what's going on. But self-esteem means I am good. It's basically I am good. I am capable. I need to love myself. If I don't love myself, I can't love other people. That's the self-esteem model. Yeah. We're going to get to, one of the things we'll do as we finish this, I'm going to have you guys tell me, because you have more familiarity with the prosperity gospel than I do. We're going to run this same 4 questions through the prosperity gospel. And I want to hear what you think about that. But yeah, so the idea is that what I need to do is I need to develop the skills to the world is, the systems are bad. I'm good. It's one of the things that we struggle with right now in our race conversation, because a lot of self-esteem has gotten into the race conversation, which what it does is it makes victimhood the key to everything. Because my problem is I'm a victim. And that's what tends to happen in the self-esteem movement, because people live as if they're victims. I don't feel good about myself, so somebody has done something to me to make me feel this way. And until I feel right. The self-esteem movement is very feelings-oriented. How do you feel? Now, we care about how people feel, but how you feel is who you are in the self-esteem movement. So who we are is good people who live in a bad world. That's who we are. Yeah. I mean, if I'm addressing somebody who's living in that and they're claiming to be a Christian, I'm saying, I think if you're trying to make yourself feel better about yourself, you're going to always confront your sinfulness. And the things you want to be, you're not being. And the things you don't want to be, you'll be being. You'll be doing. And you're going to live frustrated because you can't convince yourself that you're good. Because as much as you try to be good, you're aware of a moral law. There is no one good but God. And so the 10 Commandments, the moral law tells us that we cannot attain good. I talked yesterday about this, the test that Jim does, where everybody gives himself a 7 because they feel they need to be good, but they're aware that they can't be good. Self-esteem would say you want to work yourself up to a 10 in terms of how you feel about yourself. Self-esteem hates guilt. So a self-esteem counselor, if you say, I feel guilty, they'll stop you. No. You're not guilty. You made a mistake. You can do it differently in the future. No, but I feel guilty. No. Guilt feelings are your problem. Stop feeling guilty. And they'll work with you even if you have robbed somebody, they will say, listen, no, the reason you robbed somebody is because your environment has caused you to make poor decisions about what's best for your life, and you acted out of that poor decision. Let's help you make better decisions, more befitting with who you really are, and then you won't steal again. But I stole. I need to confess. No need to confess. It was a mistake. That's how self-esteem, that's how this works. There's no room for guilt. And here's an interesting thing, brothers. When there's no room for guilt in my psychology, you know what takes over? Shame. Shame takes over when you don't have room for guilt. Why? Because guilt can be atoned for. Guilt can be forgiven. Shame rests on us like a weight. Jesus has a remedy for shame. Jesus says, I cover shame. My goodness covers your shame. But we have a guilt problem. And our freedom from guilt is forgiveness. We acknowledge we're guilty. The Christian says, no, I'm guilty. The one thing I think we have to be careful with as Christians is there is what I would call a worm theology. I'm the worst, I'm the worm, I'm terrible, I'm terrible, I'm terrible, I'm terrible. When we don't really believe that, because we always compare ourselves to somebody else. I'm bad, I'm terrible, but I'm not as terrible as he is. That's not a good theological approach, because we need to understand that our guilt and our sinfulness is not a human comparison. It's compared to what I'm called to be according to God's law. I'm unable to. So when Paul says, I am the worst of sinners, he is not saying he's more evil than anyone else. Because he also says, I am the best of the Pharisees. What he's saying is that according to God's law, which is the standard is not human moral perfection, the standard is God's law. I am no more capable of declaring myself righteous than the worst person. So we have to understand guilt not as simply how we feel, but as the consequence of breaking the law. That's why I would encourage you guys to have in your thinking about sin several categories of sin. One category is motivational sin. Well, there's heart corruption sin, which basically means we all carry around in us the sin of our original father. So that guilt, that brokenness, that disorder, that's one way to view sin. There's also motivational sin. Out of the fact that I'm disordered, I have wrong motivations, and so I have sinful motivations. But there's also transgressive sin. I just didn't do what God called me to do, or I did what God called me not to do. And so some people need to say, that's why in counseling, sometimes the best way to help somebody says, we don't really need to get at your motivations right now. You sinned, just confess and receive forgiveness. If we think every sin has to be dealt with at motivation level, then we're going to be constantly trying to fix people on the heart level. What people need is they need to say, you know what? If I sin, let's say you're talking to somebody and they're a believer, they have a right standing before the Lord, but they speak, and we'll just use something that happens in the church. A husband who speaks harshly and vindictively against his wife or to his wife, sins against his wife, right? There's some benefit to ask the question, why? But he's never going to get free of the sin by figuring out why he did it. How does he get free of the sin? Not confess, yes. I was wrong. It's much harder for people to say I was wrong than you think. They're happy to say this is what was motivating me, but to simply say, and when you're talking to a couple, it's one interesting thing when you're doing marriage counseling. It's so interesting because you cannot often get them to say I was wrong. You cannot always get them to acknowledge a moral failure. They will say, I was angry. They'll describe their motivations, but they won't actually describe the sin. Or if they, go ahead.
There
Yeah, because their hearts are still justifying it. And so when I'm helping a couple, for example, who is dealing with the conflict, the way I help them is I say, we can't really move forward until you actually deal with the sin. And the sin is not a motivational issue. I recognize that you got angry. That's not the problem I want to deal with right now. We can talk about your tendency to get angry. But the problem is, you sinned against her. And so I want you to turn to her, if you believe you sinned against her, and I want you to confess your sin. And the husband will turn and he'll say, yeah, I shouldn't have said that to you. And I'll say, okay, I didn't hear a sin in that. I didn't hear a sin. I heard that you probably shouldn't. I heard that you didn't quite live up to your own standards. Let's try that again. Okay. I was wrong to speak to you that way. Okay, good. But what do you mean, speak to you that way? What did you say that was wrong? Tell her exactly what you said, because she may think there's something totally different, and she may be unclear what to forgive. I was wrong for saying that you are a terrible wife, and I wish I hadn't married you. That was wrong. And then I'll turn to the wife and I'll say, is that what you feel he did in sinning against you? And she may say, yes, but he didn't confess, and I wish you would leave. See, he doesn't know. So, and I'll ask the wife, is there anything else he did that you feel he needs to confess for? And she'll say, well, like that, okay. Okay, do you remember saying that? I don't remember saying that. Okay, so are you okay the fact that he doesn't remember saying that? So he can't really confess what he doesn't remember? No. Okay, well, no, we'll deal with your issue in a second, but I can't make him confess something that he doesn't remember. And you don't have a recording of it. And so let's accept what he is confessing. Now, what should you do about that? It's okay, I understand. No, the Bible doesn't let you do that. You can't say it's okay. Because clearly we're sitting in this room because it wasn't okay. If it was okay, we wouldn't be here. Well, don't worry about it. No, that doesn't work either. What does the Bible call you to? Well, that's what I'm asking her. What does the Bible call you to? Forgiving him. I got to forgive him. Okay? Okay, I forgive you. Okay, what do you think forgiveness is? Well, it means I'm not going to be angry at him for saying that. No, not really. Because you're still angry, and he's going to do it again. Something like this. Here's what you're doing when you're forgiving him. You're saying, I accept your words as a sincere acknowledgement of your wrong before God and to me. And because of that, I want to absorb all the pain that you should experience for saying those bad things to me. I want you to experience none of that pain, and I want to set you free from any responsibility to me because of what you said. I want you to go free even if it causes me pain. And and I will never bring it up again. I will not use it as a justification. It ends right here. And I'll say, so, sister, if you're not ready to do that, we're not going to use the word forgiveness right now. It's okay if you say, I want to forgive you. But if you're not ready to do that, you don't understand the nature of forgiveness. The human potential movement has none of that. That level of confession of sin that brings freedom. Because I can say to my brother, okay, brother, you have humbled yourself before the Lord. You've humbled yourself before the one you sinned against. You've acknowledged. I recognize you're still not convinced that you were entirely wrong. I recognize we need to talk about how you got here to this and the wrong of saying those kind of things and the damage of those kind of things and the foolishness of that. We're going to talk about all that. But this transaction, if it does not happen, we cannot talk about any of that. That's biblical counseling for a marriage conflict. We don't always do it just like that, but we have to recognize that we can't let people just keep their self-righteousness. One of the things, if she really does that though, if she says, now, yes, I believe God is convicting me and I provoked him and so I might say to her, okay, now it's your turn. What did you say? And we'll repeat it both ways. And if I get two people legitimately confessing and forgiving one another in a counseling session, then I know the gospel has taken hold. And now we can move forward. I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to help people figure out why they said. You said something because you're a sinner. You said something because you didn't like what she was doing. You said something because you're just a normal person and you sinned. Let's deal with it. Yeah. Well, I think I would start with, what did Jesus say? He said, forgive as I've forgiven you. If we forgive as Jesus forgave us, somebody has to absorb the pain and somebody has to go free. That's what gospel forgiveness is. It's both the recognition that an offense occurred and damage happened and somebody needs to deal with that damage. That's why I'm going to be careful. If there's in abuse, in a domestic abuse situation, you never do this. I mean, we can. I actually have I can show you on a chart how to handle this if there's domestic abuse. It looks very different. I'm talking about a otherwise okay marriage, but there's a conflict issue. If you want to talk about abuse and how that would work there, we can talk about that too. But the point I'm making in this is just to kind of play out this idea that you can't get there if you feel good about yourself as your goal. So, other questions? Well, Matthew 19 is a great place to go. You know, where how many times do I need to forgive? You know, the inexhaustible call to forgive. I go to the cross. If we're supposed to give as Jesus forgave, let's talk about how he forgave. It was costly. Forgiveness is costly. But it's the most precious thing. I tell people, listen, I'm not saying that, and if you forgive because I'm telling you to, you're not going to be able to do it. Because I'm not going to be there when you're angry again. One of the things that helps is repentance on the other side. But somebody can't forgive with the demand of repentance. I can't control you through forgiving you to repent. Repentance helps the forgiver. Repentance is a godly thing in its own right. Repentance is, if the person has sinned, repentance is God's call to them. So, if that husband doesn't repent, if he continues to use that kind of language, it starts to change from a forgiveness situation to potentially to a correction situation. Right? Okay, brother, You said you confessed your sin. You acknowledge this as sin, but you're starting to show it as a pattern. And you know it's wrong. Tell me the reason why you think it's okay to do this if you already know it's sin. Well, because no, it's not about her at this point. You know God's call to you. You know God's command. Let's look at it in His Word. And so we look and okay, see, yeah, the Bible says here, coarse words, you cannot do that. You agree, right? Yes, we agree. Then you cannot justify continuing to do that. I'm okay working with you if you're struggling and you occasionally give in to the temptation to do that and you confess and you receive forgiveness. I'm okay with that. But if you start justifying it, I'm bringing another brother. If you don't listen to me, I'm bringing another brother in and we're going down a different road. That could be discipline. The church has a role to play with unrepentant people. That's what you do with somebody. So repentance is crucial. And I help them to see, brother, you can't say you're following Jesus if you're not repentant here. You're leading a small group, we might need to have you step back until you get this together. Because you're claiming to follow Christ. If you're not willing to say to your small group, brothers and sisters, I have a real problem. I have an angry tone and angry words toward my wife. Can you pray for me? Now, if a brother does that, that's repentant. Repentance doesn't mean never doing it again. Repentance means turning away from the things that make me do that and the justification of it to a different way. And he's asking me, if he's really repentant, how can I do it differently? When she does this, how can I do it differently? How can I respond in a God-pleasing way? That's what we do in marriage. And it's what makes marriage conflict ministry both very rewarding and frustrating. Because most people never think about confessing and forgiving in their marriages. They just let it go. What we used to call it putting it in a sack. So we have a sack we carry around. You did this to me. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to put it in the sack for later. I'm saving it up. I'm saving it up. I'm saving it up. And then when I choose, it's all going to come out on you. I'm going to dump it all out. So the thing you did 6 months ago, I'm going to bring that out. The thing you did when we were first married, that's coming out too. All that's coming out at once. Because nothing's ever been forgiven. Nothing's ever been dealt with. So we've kind of gotten off into a tangent on this, but that's the self-esteem approach, the I am good approach is destructive to the gospel. We can't do gospel care if we're trying to help somebody feel better about themselves.